Hi, and welcome to a video where we're going to go over the top hardest questions from the January 2026 Chemistry Regents Exam. If you are taking a Regents exam in chemistry in June, you're taking one of two. You are either going to be taking the Chem Regents June 9th, which is the new format, or you're going to be taking the Chemistry Regents June 24th, which is the current format of the exam. The January 2026 is the exact same format as the one here for June 24th. I'm not saying if you're taking it earlier in June, you shouldn't go over these questions as well, but it's super beneficial for the students taking it later in the month. I would highly recommend going over as many Regents chemistry questions as you can on your own. I have plenty of worked out exams on my YouTube channel, NY Chem Coach. You could certainly find other explanations on YouTube for different chemistry exams as well. Here, we're going to go over the top 7. I was looking for 5, but I ended up with 7. They all have something in common, and that is some sort of calculation. So this is really important for those students that are afraid of math or don't know where to start. With that, let me give you the numbers of these questions. You can find all the Regents exams on the web. Questions 54, 57, 61, 72, 78, 82, and 85. I would suggest you do them first and then come back, or do them, pause the video and do them as we're going through them to get the max benefit. And then for any that you get wrong or you weren't sure of, I would go back and do them again. We're going to go over the type of question, how you recognize it, a common mistake students make, and then a key takeaway for each of these 7 questions. With that, let's go. Checking out question 54. This question, or this type of question, I should say, of calculating an atomic mass, whether showing the numerical setup or you're asked to calculate the answer, typically shows up on the Chemistry Regents. The easiest way to get to the answer is to get mad. By definition, the atomic mass of an element is known as the weighted average of the naturally occurring isotopes of that element that are found in nature. Using the information in the table, along with multiplying, adding, and dividing, we're going to get to our answer. Now you're asked to do a setup, so you want to show your work. You're going to go ahead and you're going to multiply the atomic mass of each, or put it down on paper, I guess I should say, because you got to show your work, the atomic mass times natural abundance for 39, for 40, and 41. The A stands for add. We're going to add those up, or at least show adding them up, and then D is for divide, and we would divide by 100. Here is my setup. Notice, took the 2 numbers each. That's my multiplication. Then, and you, by the way, no matter how many isotopes you have, you would do the same if you got 2, if you got 5, etc. Then once you set up your multiplications, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to add them. So that's why I highlighted the plus signs here. That's my second step. And finally, the D stands for divide. This entire thing would be divided by 100. That is your numerical setup, or one of the ways that you can go ahead and set this up. If you just were calculating the answer, literally, you would just follow the same format, multiply these 3 together separate, add them together, and divide by 100. Now, I do want to show you the answer key for this. Here are the variations for acceptable responses to question 54. You do not have to put the units. Only put units if you're instructed to do so in the question. I also want to point out, it says do not allow credit for numerical setup using mass numbers rather than isotopic masses. In other words, don't just round these to the whole number. Whatever you're given, that's what you're going to use. For question 57, this is a mole problem. How do I know that? You're asked to determine moles, and you are given moles. And by the way, question 54 and 57 are not found on the chemistry reference tables. These are calculations or setups that you're going to have to know. In this case, determine means you're going to calculate. You're not showing your work, you're just calculating your answer. You have a balanced equation that this is associated with, and I like to show it from the balanced equation. Determine the number of moles of hydrogen gas. That's where we're going to put our X. Required to react completely with nitrogen gas. We're going to run out of this, so we don't have to worry about this. And we want to know how much or how many moles of hydrogen gas does it take to produce 10 moles of ammonia. That's what we're given. All it is a ratio between the coefficients, the big numbers in front, in this equation. What do I have in front of hydrogen? I have the number 3. And what do I have in front of ammonia? The number 2. And what you see here is a setup of a nice proportion. All that is left is to solve for X. And of course, you're going to cross multiply and divide. So X times 2, 2X is equal to 30. Of course, you divide both sides now by 2, and your answer is 15 moles. A common mistake, students forget how to solve for X. Make sure you practice all of these questions and then some. Also, do I have to worry about significant figures here because they gave me 10.0 and I just said the answer was 15 moles. Let's check the answer key. Notice for question 57, you're going to get credit either way. Just like units, if they do not specifically ask for sig figs, you don't have to worry about it. Question 61 says determine the volume of nitrogen gas if the temperature is changed to 450 Kelvin and the pressure is changed to 60 kilopascals. Since we are changing some things, we must be dealing with the combined gas law. If you take a look here at information that was given, we have a volume, we have a temperature, and we have a gas pressure. Let's check out the reference table. So this is the first time out of the first 3 questions that the equation is on the reference table. Here it is, the combined gas law. So our initial conditions of pressure, volume, and temperature, and then our changed conditions. Your pressure and volume units must be consistent on both sides of the equal sign. Temperature, however, if we were given a temperature or both temperatures in Celsius, you have to change them to Kelvin before you do your calculation. I always think it's a great idea when you have an equation to write it in front of you as you go ahead and substitute in the numbers. To start with, here in purple is our initial conditions. Again, 320 milliliters is our volume, 300 K is our temperature, and 100 kilopascals our pressure. As far as our new conditions, we're determining the volume, so V2 is our X, we have our temperature, and we have our kilopascals. Here I'm showing you the substituted numbers, and then you solve for V2. Common mistake that students make is thinking that they can just plug the numbers into their calculator and get an answer. It is highly recommended, if you do not get to the right answer, that you write down the numbers as you see them here, and then go ahead and take it step by step when you're calculating the answer. I've substituted my numbers in, and now I would solve for V2. If you do not get the correct answer, probably the reason for that is you did not write it down and you're trying to let the calculator do the calculations in one shot. Break it up into parts. You could go ahead, for example, and multiply and divide by 300, get your 450 divided into the 60, and then divide both sides or cross multiply and divide. Take it in steps. Don't think everything has to be done in one step. The answer for 61 is 800 milliliters. I added 72 as one of the hardest questions. I wouldn't say the top 5. I would say as number 6 or number 7. Why? Because it still involves math and it can be confusing. Here we're looking about determining the amount of heat absorbed when 3.6 grams of water is heated from. And you'll notice here there's a delta T. The heat equations are on the reference table, so let's go take a peek. Here they are, all 3 heat equations. This is where a common mistake could be made, is which one of the 3 do you need? We're dealing with the warming of water, so we are going to have a delta T. If we were dealing with fusion, which is either melting or freezing or vaporization, right, evaporating or condensing, we would be using one of these other two equations. And you'll notice there's no temperature. It occurs at a temperature, but that temperature remains steady. So therefore, you don't plug any temperature into these last two. But since we're dealing with a delta T for sure, we're dealing with the top equation here, and we also need the specific heat capacity for water, which is on the front of the reference table. Reference table B, here's our specific heat capacity for water, the 4.18. Let's go back and do the calculation. Notice I wrote the equation down again, and then I went ahead and put my numbers down again to do my calculation. When you plug it in, you're going to get 677 as your answer. Now, I do want to point out that the unit that was given for your specific heat capacity of water has Kelvin instead of degrees Celsius. The reason that I don't have to worry about it here is it turns out when you're dealing with a delta T, a change in temperature, whether you're dealing with it in Celsius or Kelvin, the delta T's are the same. But again, remember with the combined gas law, that's not the case. You have to change it to Kelvin if you're given temperature in Celsius. Question 78 is also a common question that shows up a lot. And a lot of students get this wrong and use the information given to help you. We have a voltaic cell. We're told we have a voltaic cell. This is chemical going to electrical energy. Another reason we know it's a voltaic cell is real simple. You have two separate containers. You're asked to write the balanced equation for the half reaction that occurs in the nickel half cell when the cell operates. Well, half the equation means what's going on this side versus the other half, of course, which has to do with zinc. The easiest way to do this is to take the overall equation. You're pulling down what's happening with nickel on both sides. And what do we have here? We're going from a +2 charge to 0, meaning that it is electrically neutral. We're going in this direction. Well, how does that happen? Well, that's going to happen as the nickel ions gain electrons. Well, how many? Well, if we're going from +2 to a 0, it has to be 2 electrons, is my half reaction. Key takeaway here is to pull down the information that's given to you in the picture, and then you can use the number line. You don't have to. Then balance out in terms of charge with your electrons. Remember, loss of electrons is oxidation, gain of electrons is reduction. That's a big one to remember also for electrochemistry. We are checking out question 82, and we're here looking at a titration and a calculation. This equation is on the reference table. It's listed under titration, and notice we saw the word titration in the question, and we're dealing with molarities and volumes. Your volumes typically are in milliliters, but they could be in liters as well. As far as volume goes, it must be consistent on both sides of the equal sign. Once again, I've written the equation out, and then I'm going to go ahead and substitute in my numbers. I got my acid information on the left and base information on the right. Determine the concentration of HCl. Acids always start with an H, so they're easy to recognize. Using the titration data, we go back up to the information here, and we know we have a 15 milliliter sample of HCl. 15 for our volume was exactly neutralized by 25.2 milliliters of the base, so 25.2, and a half a molar concentration of NaOH. And now we're going to find out the concentration of HCl, which means that's my X. 15 times X is equal to 0.5 times 25.2. Determine the concentration means we're just going to give the answer, plug it in the calculator, and make sure that you're actually getting the right answer. 0.84 molarity is our answer. If you didn't get that, remember, take your calculations in steps. Write things down. Make sure you can do this. Don't just look at it and go, yeah, I got it, and move on. That's not practicing and making sure that you're going to do your best on this exam. The last of the 7 questions we've gone over, and we're dealing with a half-life problem. You will see a half-life problem, just like an atomic mass problem, pretty much for sure come the June Regents exam. In this case, it says based on table N, so we are going to go to the reference table, determine the fraction of an original sample of tritium that remains unchanged after 36.93 years. Let's go get the half-life information and come on back and set this up. Once again, we don't have any equation on the reference tables for this. We're going to just do a setup. You can just be consistent with your setups, practice them, and you'll be ready for the exam for yourself. Tritium is the name for hydrogen 3. Here is the half-life. We're going to need that in order to do our calculation. Half-life is the time it takes for half of the tritium via beta decay to change into a different isotope. I like to do this question where you can see what's happening. So let's do that. Since we're dealing with fractions, our original sample, we're going to assign the number 1. If we weren't using fractions and they gave us a mass, we would just go ahead and start with that mass. What's happening? Well, 12.31 years from now, we're going to have half of the original sample left. The other half has decayed into something else. So that's 12.31 years. Now time marches on. In another 12.31 years, we're going to have half of a half, which is a quarter. So now my time that's elapsed is 12.31 plus 12.31, which is 24.62. Another 12.31 years goes by, and now I have a half of a quarter, or I have an eighth. And my time, again, is cumulative, so I'm just going to add 12.31 to the 24.62, and guess what? I'm going to get to 36.93 years. What is the sample that remains unchanged? Right here, 1/8. You could set this up as a table. You could do a little bit of math, but I like to see it like this. I think it's really easy. The time, again, is going by. When you start with 1, you start at time 0. And that's like a stopwatch, and then you go from there. I hope this helped. I hope you got some great information. Some key takeaways overall. You got to practice. When it comes to the math problems, make sure that you write things down. Take your time. Look for those clues as to what you're doing. Not everything is found on the equation reference table, so make sure you know how to do these questions. It's the same format. It's just that they're going to change up the numbers. And no matter what, you're in control. Keep working hard, and good luck.